Just reminding us, it's a branch of maths that deals with the collection, organisation and analysis of data. It's probably the type of maths that people use the most in their life. Like you would say, the most people, if out of all maths that they would use in their careers, most people would use stats. Not everyone uses calculus, of course, but most people in their lives will use stats at some point, or probability. So it's a very popular kind of maths because it's very real world mathsy kind of stuff. So what's the purpose of stats? Lauren, are you following? You can share it though. What's the purpose of stats? Yeah, totally. Gambling, yep. Trying to work out the odds, the best one to pick. Like, what card should they pick? Okay, anyway. So, purpose of stats. So, lots of different things. So, governments use stats a lot. Have you noticed the Bermuda government? Do they do things like census? The census, yeah. So that's one way the Bermuda government does a lot of stats. What's some other kind of stats the Bermuda government would probably collect? There's heaps. Yeah, health stats. Something to do with bikes. Yeah, deaths and accidents, that kind of thing. Yep. Over time. Yeah, so there's lots of stats that governments like to collect. What's the purpose of governments collecting stats? What could they do with that information?
Predict.
Yeah, predict, yeah. Like what money, like look for trends and that kind of thing. And try to decide we need to allocate more money to bike safety or something. Or we need to allocate more money to hospitals or roads. Yeah. And programs. Do we need to set up a program? Is this such an issue that we need to set up a program? Do you remember when you guys all had to fill in a survey one day? What was that about? Remember, like, that was about drugs. Yeah, so that must have been the government identified them. They felt there was a problem, but maybe they needed to collect data. So maybe they needed to collect real data to then make decisions about what they would do about it. Like, is it bad enough that we need to put money into programs? Do we need to set up programs? That kind of thing. More police, whatever. So the government can request every adult living in a country complete a census. This may include questions like how many children do you have? Do you plan to have any more? How do you travel to work? Did you go to university? Or do you plan on furthering your education at university? What's the point of these questions? So some of you said it before. Future predictions, yeah, exactly. Future predictions. Sometimes, like, in order to justify allocating money to something, maybe they need data to prove it. Because, like how governments, they'll have debates and all that kind of thing. So to some extent, to justify the money that they're going to spend, they probably need to have some kind of data, or else they could get criticised for allocating that money. So by answering such questions, the government can determine the future planning. Do we need more schools to accommodate the growing population, or is it a shrinking population? Do we need to buy more schools and hospitals if the population grows? Are people using public transport more or driving to get around? Should we build more roads and more bus routes? So the general population, in terms of schools and that, would you say in Bermuda it's growing or shrinking?
Shrinking.
Shrinking, yeah. What kind of caused that to happen, do you think? Can you remember? Oh yeah, there is that, yep. And some... yeah, definitely. And something around 2007 probably kind of kicked it off. Yeah, the recession, yeah. So the recession was another thing, like, a lot of those big overseas businesses left Bermuda, which meant less people had jobs, less people kind of like here, that kind of thing, putting their kids into schools. So that is hard. So, like, for example, schools as well probably need this kind of data for their own kind of planning as well. Yeah, so all sorts of things can happen that make you need to make plans. And decide what to do with money. So what am I doing? Okay, we've moved on from there. I moved on by 2. Okay, so also, like, I noticed, how many of you take psychology? Lauren, Ola, what are you doing? What are you doing on your laptop? Okay, so Talise does, Katie does. Anyone else take psych? Oh, not that. Yep. Okay, Chiesa. So not that many of you. I thought more of you would. Okay. So some examples of hypotheses in psych. That's why I just thought I'd put it up, just in case any of you choose to do something related to psych in your math IA. There's some examples if you did do stats and you did psych IA. Some things you could do, hypotheses, social conformity. So one psychology hypothesis example includes the measured effects of conformity in social situations. For instance, you could hypothesize that an individual is likely to cross his legs if he notices that everyone nearby is doing so. In order to measure this hypothesis, you could set up a situation in which a group of Confederates, people who actively contribute to the experiment, sit near a subject, the person that you're not studying. When all of the Confederates cross their legs and the subject notices it, the subject would either follow suit, a confirmation of your hypothesis, or violate the pattern, a rejection in your hypothesis. So if that was a math IA, you would have to have some numbers somewhere. So are there any numbers you could collect from that? Yeah?
How long it takes for them to
Yeah, yeah. How long it takes? Yeah, exactly. That's a good point. Like, yeah, and you could have different ones, like ones where you just, I suppose, yeah, no, you observe it for a certain period of time, yeah, and then you collect how many did cross them, how many didn't, how long it took them. Yeah, all sorts of things. So the main thing is you need to think, what kind of numbers can I get? You can have categories as well, but you also definitely need numbers in there if it's a math IA. Another thing is hypothesis about ethics. Could predict the likelihood of a person cheating on a test. For example, you could set up a situation in which subjects are taking a test. A bit hard for you guys to do, but you could try. Under the assumption that no one would know if they cheated, and compare it to a situation in which subjects know that their actions are being watched. You could set up a variety of variables, such as adding incentives to cheat on the test or showing Confederates who appeared to be cheating, like having people being in there like actors kind of, like, and when they see someone else is cheating, oh, I could do that too. And then measure the impact of each of these variables against the control group. Again, that would be, how would you collect numbers from that? Yeah, how would you know if they cheated or not?
the same?
Same wrong answers could be, yeah. That's true. I was just suddenly thinking that.
What if they're just bad answers?
Yeah, what if it was actually their answer? Yeah, that's true. How would you know? Yeah, so that is a bit of a hard one to do. But yeah, there's other ways, I guess. A hypothesis about generosity might be that people are more likely to help a stranger if they have recently been helped in some way. To test this, you could arrange to have a Confederate hold open a door to a building, effectively performing a favour for the subject. Then another Confederate on the street can ask the Confederate for simple directions. Once you have performed this experiment enough, you can compare your experimental group, the subjects who had the door held open for them, to a control group, others who did not have the door held open. This enables you to measure if the door handling act had any impact on the likelihood of the subject doing a favour of their own. But yeah.
You have to make sure they know where the place is that they ask directions for, because they might actually not know.
Yeah, that's true.
Because people are like, what the one year? Because even if the person didn't have the door open, they still give directions.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's it's a friendly place, so there might be high levels of generosity in Bermuda. Maybe I wonder if you could test it here and somewhere else. Okay, so back onto the basic stuff. Types of data. Qualitative. In the old days, this might have been considered categorical. Do you remember categorical data in CIE? So that's what qualitative data is. So data that can be described in words, yeah. Yeah, words, words, categories. But you might be thinking of categories. You might be thinking of this one, because they look, the words, in IB we say qualitative and quantitative. And the problem is with those ones is they look really similar. Whereas categorical and numerical were better because they sound very different. So quality means like what quality, what kind of, like, you know, blue eyes, green eyes, brown eyes, that kind of thing. Some examples. What are some examples of categorical data? Yeah, go everyone. like colour. Any other ones that are
Subject.
subject? Yep. Subject taken. Lots of things. Yep. Places, leaves. Anything, yeah. Gender, is that one? Yeah, gender. Something like grade level, like what year you're in. It says, yeah. Even though it's got numbers in it, like grade 7, grade 8. That's a very good point, yeah. So, and that's kind of like subjective, isn't it? Yeah, because sometimes qualitative data has numbers in it, but if it's a category like grade level, year 7, year 8, year 9, to some extent, it's kind of got a numerical thing to it because it follows a number line. But it but at the same time, yeah, like
Like I'm not
It's a
gonna
hard
go
one.
around saying I'm 16.2.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, actually, in that case, it would just be quantitative, but it would be discrete. Discrete quantitative. I guess it would be quantitative, this one, but it would be discrete, as in like whole numbers only kind of thing, yeah. So I would say more quantitative. Grade level is another one that's a bit subjective. Because if you're comparing and changing grade level with something, then the grade level to some extent is a numerical quantity where the numbers have meaning. So if the numbers don't really have meaning, then maybe it's more categorical. So that one's, the grade level is kind of a grey area. Quantitative. So qualitative in the old days you would have said categorical. Quantitative in the old days you would have said something starting with M. N. Numerical, yeah. Numerical. And then data that has a numerical value, number value or numerical value. So these are the two big ones, qualitative and quantitative. So quantitative can be either discrete or continuous. So that's kind of the relationship. They're the two big umbrella terms, qualitative, quantitative. And quantitative can be discrete or continuous. Qualitative is just qualitative. In our course anyway. So discrete data can only take something values. So not necessarily whole number values, but specific. Discrete data can only take specific values, e.g. like 1, 2, 3, 4, or like 1.1, 1.2, 1.3, 1.4. So discrete data doesn't have to be whole numbers. It just has to be data where there is kind of like a finite amount of decimals at least. Like money would be considered discrete. Why would money be discrete, do you think? Exactly, yeah, because it can only be rounded to 2 decimal places. You couldn't get $3.249 in the real world. So yeah, so one example of discrete is money. E.g. $3.25, as opposed to 3.259. No, that could be many decimal places. Yeah, that can be lots. And it's because the exchange rate's more like an abstract concept, whereas the money is kind of like the real kind of thing, the real concept. And an exchange rate is a different thing to money, different kind of thing. Yeah. But yeah, exchange rates don't have to be rounded to any particular amount of decimals. It's up to the person saying what the exchange rate is, what they round it to. Okay, yeah, money is example. Age, that's the other one that we mentioned. Age, DG, 24, 25. Anything else that's discrete? That's a good point. Is it discrete or continuous?
But it's continuous because you can measure it to a smaller value.
Yeah, exactly. Like you could get it's possible to get 3.94723. It just depends on how accurate your measuring instrument is. Yeah, it's continuous is time. So if you say the number of anything, the number of students, then it's automatically discrete. So the number of parts means it's automatically continuous, discrete. Number of jobs or number of anything. Because it means that you have to count it. So discrete data is counted as opposed to continuous data, which is, I think someone measured something with an instrument. Continuous data, is measured normally with an instrument of some kind, like a thermometer, a clock, weighing scales, that kind of thing, a ruler. Can take on any numerical value. So discrete means like 1.1, 1.2. It's not possible to have the number, in this case, 1.15. But if it's continuous data, you could have the number 1.111111 and so on. You can take any numerical value. A good example is time. What's it measured with? It's measured with stopwatch or clock sometimes. So the only thing that limits the amount of decimals in continuous data is the accuracy of your measuring instrument. Like, does it measure to the nearest 0.05 grams or to the nearest 0.005 grams? So what's some other examples of continuous data? Yeah, that's a good one. Temp, you have to use a thermometer. Some others? Science is a good one, thinking of continuous data. What else do you measure in science? Yeah, Lee. Use a ruler. Speed, yeah, that's the one. Speed. What do you measure speed with?
What are those measures?
Yeah, speedometer. Speedometers. Mass is another one. Like a weight. Yeah, volume. Good. Volume, area. It's measured. What do you measure mass with? Wavelength, yeah. Wavelength, what, physics? Chemistry, yeah. Things like other things like air pressure, rainfall, that kind of thing. But that's air pressure. Okay. So that was the main things: qualitative, quantitative. To some extent, like if you're talking about an IA, it might be just useful to think of these things as well. Primary data collected by the individual for your own specific purposes. Secondary means you just got it from somewhere else, like the internet.
Or a scientific journal.
Yeah, or a scientific journal. Yeah. So some examples of primary data. So if you in your IA collected primary data, what should that be? Yeah. Experiments. Yeah. Exactly. Experiment. Surveys. Anything else? What's that? Suppose if it was a psych one, it could be your observations or something.
Isn't it an experiment?
Yeah, it is, yeah. It's a psych experiment, yeah, to be right. It goes under that term. Only things like that, isn't it? Experiments, surveys. That's if it was secondary data, what's some examples of secondary data you think? Yes. Scientific journals.
Like government census, like websites.
Yeah. Yeah, these things are all things where people get stuff at their IA. Like someone goes to government websites and gets their data. Have you ever heard of a website called Gapminder? That's a pretty well used one. So Gapminder just got invented. It's a website by this guy called Hans Rosling, and there's just one spot where they have lots and lots of data from lots of things around the world, like the World Health Organization. Yeah, Gapminder. He's got data from the World Health Organization. What is the other one? I can't remember. So other government sites. and he collates them. So you might be interested in the GDP per capita and the years of education people have spent in school on average, and you can have it for different countries and for different years. So a big spreadsheet pops out where it's got all the data on GDP per capita for, like, maybe 100 or 200 different countries and for different years. So I'll show it to you if you want. It's one that people have used if they do stats IAs. In math studies, they do stats IAs a lot. So they go to Gapminder a lot. So someone was interested in, I think he was interested in prison population and GDP per capita. Like, do the richer countries have less people in prison or more people in prison? Oh gosh, no. So you go to Gapminder, data, that would be it. Just go straight to data. And see, here's all your indicators. And there's heaps of them. Like, all. So there's, see all the different, it's just showing you how long it is. So what's one here that you're kind of interested in? Malaria, number of deaths?
Malaria deaths per 100,000.
Maybe. Or maybe what about one where there'd be more countries? Because maybe not every country has malaria deaths.
Males aged 15, unemployment rate percent.
Yep, okay, yep. So unemployment of males. So some people have looked into things like unemployment and depression rates and alcohol rates and all that kind of thing, and suicide rates, to see if there was a correlation. So then you would go across and I would select the spreadsheet if it was for an IA, because you'd ideally want to get data that you can copy and paste into your own spreadsheet later, and see a lovely thing pops up. Here it is. So see what they have on the top. What down here they have all the countries, and going across they have all the years. And how recent is the data collected?
2005.
Yeah, so sometimes it's always worth opening and seeing, do we have any recent data? So that's a bit old. I'm surprised actually they've only got old data like that. And they don't have many countries either. That's rubbish. So yeah, so if you went to Gapminder, you don't always get whole, like, each category doesn't necessarily have heaps of stuff. So you'd have to check, does it have what I'm looking for? Math achievement. No. I didn't even know they had this stuff. Do they have more data on this? Because it's all up to, like, does the country have data? 2007. And see, it's got lots of countries listed, but it's missing data from most of them.
There's like no data.
Yeah.
Yeah, so see, this one doesn't have much either.
Is there data on there?
Yeah. Oh yeah. No data.
No data. I wonder who does have it, like, because you need some kind of standardized test, wouldn't you? It's a bit weird. Motorcycle deaths per 100,000 people.
They don't. Great.
Don't know. Even recently? Let's see.
Doing better. This is the best one so far.
So Bermuda has their own, but obviously, like, this site hasn't collated it. So see, they've got,
Yeah.
Motorcycle
and then you'd want to look to see how did they do it. How did they record it? They call it adjusted indicator file. There's some formula they use to calculate it. Yep. Okay.
4 point something deaths.
Yeah, they've done some kind of calculation. They've converted it. Might be per capita.
It's per 100,000 people.
Oh, there you go, yeah. Yeah, so it's always good to look to see, how is it done? Per 100,000 people, or is it per capita? But instead they did per 100,000, or else it ended up being too small a number. Newly HIV infected, yeah. All sorts of things, yeah, there's health things as well. There's data on, like, carbon dioxide levels as well, economic things. Goes up to 2011, yeah. They'll probably have diabetes, yeah. They often have cancer rates and stuff like that.
Can you just copy it, or do you have to put it onto your own document?
Yeah, what we would tend to do is the person would copy this, and they would also, whatever year they want, they would press Control and copy that, and then Control C, and then they'd open their own document and paste it in. and then delete off the countries they don't need and all that kind of stuff. That's generally how they would do it. So yeah, what kind of, by the way, that was all to point out, what kind of data is that? That was secondary data.
Great. I think you should do this in your IA. You should collect primary data
About what?
HIV infected people.
Do you have HIV?
That would be pretty hard.
People. That's how many people have got.
What? It's like steal the blood.
You know how many people go to clinics? Go
around
Yeah, but how else would they get the data?
That's my point. They don't.
What are we talking about?
They don't have access data on how many people have HIV.
Because it's a privacy thing, confidentiality, yeah.
Yeah.
But they could.
Sarah, you need to get
know
tested.
how they got.
But Bella,
Why would I?
I'm just like,
Why would I need to?
and you don't want to go get tested at a public clinic.
But I would
You're
not.
still gonna take like a little
That's
vest.
not an option for me. I would get tested.
But you could
Because
get
you're-
tested.
Bella, why would you
really
need to
at a
get
public
tested right
clinic.
now?
See, I wouldn't get me to be tested, but it's still like, who wouldn't get tested?
But
People
I feel
who
like
don't need to be tested.
Yeah, but what if you don't?
You're like,
on never mind.
Why,
You don't even
Sarah,
get
what would have
tested at a
happened to
public
me
clinic.
so that I would
You
get
don't
HIV?
True. Okay, moving right along. Okay, so why do we need to consider, hello, why do we need to consider types of data we are collecting? Oh,
Tables and graphs.
yes, I don't remember what it was.
I want that one.
either. Tables and graphs. Yeah. So if you just collect one list of data, like if you just collected GDP per capita, like how wealthy a country is, could you make a scatter graph out of that?
No.
No, yeah. So the kind of data you get affects what kind of tables and graphs you could do. Like, could you do bivariate stats? Could you do univariate stats? The tables and graphs we draw influence the kind of something we can do.
Analysis.
Yeah, that was it. What it was. Analysis.
Consider issues of
Yeah. Science, yeah.
Do better.
E.g., did I collect my data fairly? So sometimes when people do use surveys, they get really angry because their friends in the common room don't answer them properly. They don't take, sometimes when people collect their own survey data, like say if they said, I want to survey all IB students about this, sometimes they get a bit annoyed because they'll get their survey results back and go, no one took it seriously, they just wrote stupid answers. So that would be an example of, I don't know, some kind of bias.
What kind of things do they survey IQ people about?
Sometimes it's been like stress level. So stress level, yep. And someone was stress level and people would have to like self-rate certain things. Like some people did psychology stuff where they self-rated stress level.
But you see, with that, I feel
And
like everybody has a different
happiness?
like, idea of
Yeah.
what like it
Yeah.
is.
So, exactly, yeah. So they would then have to criticize their data collection process at some point and say,
That's fun.
um,
Because couldn't they give a graph that it shows like how stressed you are? Like 8 is like nearly about to have a breakdown,
mm,
and then 2 is like would 2 be? But I feel
Two is like,
Find a difference
Like,
between like
get butterflies in your
stress
stomach.
caused by school and like
yeah, is it something else?
I
Yeah.
get fire in my house.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
Like, oh, I have work.
And someone tried to collect something on does the number of siblings they have affect their happiness and their ability to be in, like, you know, to be happy at home kind of thing. So someone did sibling numbers and that kind of thing. Someone did, yeah, happiness against, yeah, exactly, yeah. And a lot of people didn't have that many siblings, so it was hard to get, like, you know, a range of results.
If you know what you want to do with your life. That's a good one. How do you rate that on a scale?
Well, that's exactly. You don't know at all.
Yeah, we need
So if you
numbers.
like somewhat know what you want to do, but you don't know exactly what you think
Yeah,
like
so
when
it's
people have
one
different
side.
definitions of exactly what they want to do.
No
Like,
clue.
like if you want to
Ten
do this
is how-
specific university to do this
It's
specific
still
degree,
recorded.
but then somebody else could go,
We're giving
oh,
you
you know, I want to go to
okay.
this country and
Yeah.
I want to do something in this.
Yeah,
It beats the other
10
two.
is like having the next 30 years of your life planned out, and 0 is like, I don't even know what I'm doing tomorrow.
0.
Wait, we should do one like based on the country they're from.
You're gonna go travel to other countries to
No,
pass it
I
out.
mean like in like Miss Colombia, I feel like
Oh.
it's really happy.
Are you
What?
happy with? Are your parents happy with what you want to do?
Who cares if they're happy with it? I'm only doing
Yeah,
it.
but doesn't that influence people?
It depends on the person.
Different countries.
Per country.
How
Like
would
that
that
works.
Wait, what?
How
Yeah,
would that work?
Well, because like some people say that their parents want them to do this, they only do that.
Oh, yeah, like if you were in a place like Korea, then like you kind of have to do what your parents want you to do.
There's whether
It
it's a
depends on
high
their
pressure
culture.
situation.
Yeah, it depends on the culture. Or I was like, if you were in like America, you could just do it. Whatever you wanted.
Yeah, I think my parents weren't even sure what I was studying. They knew I was studying, but they weren't really that clear on it. You think she's doing something with science? What's that?
You would be a great example.
Yeah. But that was also back in the 90s when it wasn't so much pressure. Whereas there's more pressure for you guys, pressure and competition.
You study like physics or something?
I didn't. My major was chemistry.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was interested in physics though.
When did you
Oh.
study math?
Maths, in the science degree, Bachelor of Science. So as in like you do general, you do a bit of everything. Like you don't just go and just do chemistry. You have to do a bit of everything as well. But you pick which one you want to do the most subjects in.
So, did you do like your teaching degree in math?
That was afterwards. So what I did was that, and then you just do a 1-year add-on. And I actually picked science. But if you've got science and physics, like if physics and chemistry is kind of your kind of science, then you can't avoid maths. And if you had, so long as you had some maths in your degree, like you could, if you didn't do any math subjects in your degree, then they wouldn't let you teach. Oh, they probably could let you teach the younger years, but not like senior. You have to have had some maths at college level,
What kind of math?
at least first year.
Plus,
I could teach your work on
I could not teach them how to do like basic math.
That's awesome. Now we're back to math.
Yeah.
Okay, did I collect my data fairly and all that kind of stuff? Yeah, that was pause. Am I on the right page?
Yes.
Okay. All right, so this is an example, like, is this data collection valid or not? So an example would be if you did a survey, and a lot of people have done surveys of BMIs, like, the body mass index for their IAs. An example would be measuring the weight of students to do something like BMI in a grade by asking them what they weigh, because, like it's a bit of an invasion of people's privacy to make them stand on a scale in front of everyone. So quite often when it comes to surveys, people just instead ask them what they weigh. So is that a good idea? Why not? Yeah.
Or like if they don't know, they're just guess.
Yeah, exactly. Like a lot of people don't even know what they weigh. So they could lie. They are likely to lie, for example, because they don't want to say in front of other people what they got, or even in front of you maybe. They may not know. And also for me, I would tell you my weight, I would say like I'm 69 kilograms. Why could that be a problem for someone here?
Because I don't weigh in pounds.
Yeah, in pounds, yeah. So you could have different units. Not such an issue, but you can always convert them, but that's still a pain. It's not such an issue. Different interpretations of what you mean by weight, kind of basically. So yeah, that's sometimes a bit of a problem. I'm sure people would try to answer honestly, but weight's a bit of a sensitive one. Sometimes people get a bit funny about having to write it down. Yeah, exactly.
When
When did they collect the data?
wherever it's already
Where is the originator?
So what was the first one?
Who?
Yeah, who collected the data? Was it you? Was it someone else? Was it World Health Organization? Was it government? Was it some dodgy business?
Why?
Yeah, why did they collect the data? Was it to justify? So this is something that's interesting. Like, if you do get secondary data, try to think about these things. Like, the data. If you got selected, yeah, how did they collect the data? Was it by survey?
Isn't it who, what, when, where, why?
Oh yeah, but this is not necessarily meant to be that.
I think.
So who? Yeah, how did they collect the data? Was what I was thinking.
Couldn't when be a factor as well?
Yeah, exactly. That's a good point. Yeah.
Yeah. Where?
Oh, from where?
Oh, okay.
Do you think?
Uh,
Well, what were you thinking instead?
I just
Where?
Oh, okay, yeah. So yeah,
Where,
from where?
where
Did they collect the data? Yep. Oh, like what countries? Did they survey just people 15 years upwards?
Oh, it is when instead of how.
I just did both.
Or no, it's when instead of why, because the number 6 is why.
Ah, got you.
For what? Why was the data
What
collected?
reason?
Oh.
Yeah. Or for what reason? Yep. For reason, purpose, any of those. Yeah, that's true. I was thinking who. So do you want to change that one to when?
No, why?
Okay. Who collected the data? Yeah, that's right. Because it was for what purpose? When did they collect the data? So, e.g., what year? Was it 1954? How did they collect the data? Like, was it survey? Government census? Who collected the data? Was it a government business, a corporate instead? From where did they collect the data? E.g., was it males 15 plus? People
Wait,
probably
from
look.
where?
Yeah, from where? Like I'm just saying example, like
A male?
male
Maybe
15
like
plus.
country?
Oh, yeah, it could. Oh, yeah, exactly. Like, was it Bermuda? Was it just the Caribbean countries? Was it just European countries? Yeah, so if you do get data from a secondary source, try to think of these things and try to look into it.
Thank you.
It's kind of interesting. If you can get that information, it's good to put that in your IA. How flawed was the data sampling process? Yeah. Data collection process. It's hard to say when it's secondary, but if it was yours, if it was primary, then you could say, you could definitely pick holes in the way you collected your data. Did they take measurements? If so, how was it done? Were people surveyed? If so, when and where? What purpose? That kind of thing. And Lauren, I'd like to ask you about these things. What is the difference between a population and a sample? According to this.
Population is like a large group, and then a sample is a smaller group of that population.
Yeah.
It's a subset.
Yeah.
It's a
The
random
subset,
selection.
yeah. Yep. So the population. Population is a larger group. Where? That kind of thing. So you said it's a random selection, yeah. A sample is a random selection from the population. Smaller sample selection from that population or population. It works grammatically. And Isabella, you also mentioned it in a mathematical kind of sense as well. Yeah. Sample is a subset of the population. What else is on here? Random selection, yeah, so we've kind of got the words of selection, sample, little people. Oh yeah, so you can get two different means. The mu, what would be the mu?
What would be the what? The mu?
Yeah, so that little symbol, so you pronounce it. Mu. Mu, N-E-W, something like that. Or however you would say. Pronounced phonetically as, not new. Mu.
Is it M-E-W?
Yeah, I would say mu. M-E-W. Or how you just write it however you would phonetically say it. Mu.
Sound like a cat.
Some people might say M-Y-O-O. Pronounced mu. That's the mean of. It's pretty obvious. Yeah. Kids, what are you doing? So that little one there. That's the mean of which bit? Population, yeah.
Okay.
And this one here is the mean of
The sample.
the sample, yeah.
What is that called?
Sample.
Yeah, that doesn't have a particular symbol. It's just X with a line on it. Our regular
We
looking
should
name.
name it.
What should we call it?
Crew.
sample mean. There's this, that one, this one is the mean of a population, and this one is the mean, the X is the environment, is the mean of a sample. So sample mean,
It's you.
population mean.
Because it's
Few.
the most. I think it should be no.
I thought one was going to say, and then few as in few.
So guess what I have as a little homework for you guys?
I just did that.
Yeah, just to do this little table. So I said categorical, but I should have said qualitative. But you know that categorical means qualitative, don't you? So I should say
What year was it on?
qualitative.
9 and 7.
So
No.
just out of interest, in case you're not sure what to do, the number of brothers a person has. Guys, this is finished. So the number of brothers a person has, what would that be?
Quantitative.
Yeah, quantitative, and is it new?
Discrete.
Yeah. So quantitative,
Yeah.
discrete, because it's the number of. So if quantitative, what's some possible quantities? Number of brothers a person has? Yeah, exactly. Usually 0 to 7. They're just saying what you think is realistic. 0 to 7. Okay, so that's your little homework. It's just to do this page.